Sit down. Hey kids, ever heard of Gearbox software? It's hard to take Gearbox seriously. It's been like that for a while, but its reputation wasn't slowly diminishing over many years like Electronic Arts or the French, but rather dropped from a cliff after slipping on everlasting lubrication provided by company's CEO. Because you see, Randy Pitchford is a greasy bastard. But let's start from the beginning. Randy started his career in 3D Realms and worked on a couple of niche little titles like Duke Nukem 3D and Shadow Warrior. After a failed attempt to establish a new studio with a couple of his colleagues in '97, he did it again, forming Gearbox in 1999. Gearbox quickly got to work and developed two Half-Life expansions, Opposing Force and Blue Shift. They also made a PlayStation 2 port of the game and DK, a co-op split-screen mode exclusive to Sony's console. After that, studio was mostly busy with ports until 2005, when Gearbox's claim to fame released, Brothers in Arms Road to Hill 30. The game, and its sequel, that released the same year, were really quite successful and deserving a video of their own. Seeing the success of their first original IP, Randy greenlit development of another one the very same year, one that potentially was a bit more risky: Borderlands. On the other side of the world, on December 11th, 2006, Sega acquired Alien's license, and eager to get people hyped, quickly announced two big budget games. One would be an FPS developed by Gearbox, which sounded like a decent developer choice given past releases, and the second would be an action RPG developed by none other by Obsidian. I will just let this prototype footage play for a bit. For no big reason, really. From Sega's perspective, next couple of years were relatively chill. They were handing the money to two competent studios and awaiting results. Meanwhile, Randy Pitchford, in a stroke of genius, when given the funds, instead of using them to complete the contract, bumped them into Borderlands. Borderlands launched in 2009 and was well received by gamers and critics alike. While Randy was basking in the glory of a new release, Sega was facing serious money issues and decided that they can't afford two big games at the same time. And a quick game for everybody listening at home, I want you to take a wild guess which one got cancelled. Randy decided that there was no time to wait, and shortly after Borderlands launched, he greenlit a sequel. Also, in 2010, Gearbox acquired rights to Duke Nukem, automatically continuing development of Duke Nukem Forever, which started in 1996. Duke's long journey straight to hell is, once again, a story for another time. So, in 2010, Gearbox had three major projects in the works: Borderlands 2, Duke, and Aliens. All, if given proper attention, could potentially be huge hits. One of them was not like the others, however. Since Borderlands is an in-house IP, it was given the highest priority. Duke also got the in-house treatment, but the development of Aliens was outsourced to Timegate in November 2010. Timegate was a small studio known for well-received but obscure RTS series Kohan, expansions for Fear, and an FPS Section 8. So Gearbox developers took a long break from Aliens. In the meantime, in 2011, Duke Nukem Forever released, and we all know how that went, right? Once Borderlands 2 went gold, Gearbox was ready to receive and finish Timegate's work. Development team was not enthusiastic for that prospect at all, however. Duke showed them how challenging it is to finish someone else's project and how badly that can end. But the game had to be finished. And it had to be finished quickly. Sega was really close to launching a lawsuit. Aliens Colonial Marines had to be ready by 2013. Randy remained surprisingly optimistic though. Through all of that, he felt really comfortable giving interviews, hyping the game up, and most of all, wanted a demo to show to the public. That alone was not really the issue. The issue was that he told devs not to worry about specs of the machine running the demo. so it was rendered on high-end PCs with lots of effects that were nowhere to be found in the final release. Finally, in 2013, Aliens Colonial Marines was released. Reception from critics was lukewarm at best, customers weren't nearly as kind. And as a cherry on top, thanks to the demo, both Gearbox and Sega were sued for false advertising. So, how bad can it be, really? I played the Xbox 360 version of the game, and for the most part it looks alright. Obviously not nearly as nice as the fake demo. Lots of environmental effects are missing, and most importantly, the dynamic lighting met the cutting room floor. But it looks like a mid-gen 360 game. Can't imagine it being impressive at all in 2013, especially with next-gen hardware releasing later that very year. But even with at times shaky framerate, N64 textures, and impressive amount of screen tearing, in current year, I find it hard to give a fuck about. My point is that it looks like a 7th gen console game, and it kind of is one. Just because I don't blame the platform for jank that I was exposed to, it doesn't mean that there was none at all. Outright glitches are rare, and mostly related to ragdolls. There is also this thing where you can walk into models of friendly NPCs, but only sometimes. Misaligned textures happen, and death animations are overall incredibly junk and sometimes break. While aliens and environment models look okay, I can't really say that about the faces of NPCs. I can't really decide if that's because of uncanny valley quality of graphics at the time, or is it the game's fault, but people look like wax figures. Models aside, complete lack of facial expressions doesn't help at all. NPCs move their mouths alright, but aside of that is a fucking death stare. Especially Hicks. I think he got the short end of the stick. It is quite easy to talk about things that are outright bad or ones that exceed expectations, but once something is just alright, it is hard to say anything about this at all. Such is the case of the soundtrack. It's fine. It's generic, sure, but for what it is, a orchestral score that imitates action movies tracks, it's, you know, fine. Voice acting, I think, is pretty decent. Michael Bain and Lance Henriksen return as Hicks and Bishop. IMDb tries to convince me that Mark Rolston and Old Matthews do also, but their characters don't really appear in the story. They might be buried somewhere in like audio logs or something, but I couldn't really bother with those. I know for sure that those characters exist as DLC skins for multiplayer, so maybe that's it. The rest of the cast is composed of TV actors and they're all, you know, okay. The deadly sin of this game's soundscape is the only thing that should be stellar. It's the pulse rifle. The weapon is full auto, but the sound effect is not. To make the matters even better, sound also does not match the ammo depletion rate.
God damn it, they got auto turrets!
While we are at the topic of the pulse rifle, there's one thing that was probably causing severe brain damage to some watching. Pulse rifle is beyond iconic visual design. It and PKD Blaster are the best fictional weapon designs ever. Classic, recognizable, and believable. So what in the living fuck happened here? The game features a weapon customization system, where you can change attachments and skins. For most of the guns it's whatever, but on poor little pulse rifle, it looks like a bunch of tumors. It might seem that I hate everything that this game did to its source material. And that's not entirely true. What I found pretty neat are some of the environments, especially the alien nest.
Should we at least cut him out? How did they cocoon this structure so quickly?
They're already dead.
Direct references to the movie are rarely tasteful, but for me, who watched the movie a couple of days before playing the game, it was kinda cool seeing the half of Bishop in the hangar, finding the little bicycle, visiting the colony on LV-426, even though it should not exist, but that's beside the point, and even seeing the train turrets.
Looks like somebody put up a hell of a last stand here.
The guns are dry. Every bullet.
And of course, the pilot is here. It's in every alien-related piece of media ever. It was obvious that it would be here. Such is the segue to talking about the game's plot. So, it has been 17 weeks since the events of Aliens. Space Marines finally got around to responding to SOS sent by Hicks, I believe. First squad enters the Sulaco and is met with explosion that leaves them either dead or injured. You and your squad are sent shortly after to meet, you know, boys. What happens next shows the Olympian level of mental gymnastics that the writers had to exercise in order to keep your squad stranded on the ship. As you are noping the fuck of that ship through the umbilical, a marine in front of you collapses, gets chest bursted and blows himself up. In a tube between spaceships, with other people inside. Thanks to, let's call it, game's loose interpretation of physics, you manage to go back to the infested Sulaco and survive. Still wanting to leave this hellhole, you get to the spaceship from the movie climax, but once again, an idiot with a grenade blows it up. You get a call from Bella, another marine stuck there, and instead of leaving by a dropship, which just arrived to save you by the way, you and your buddy O'Neill go deep looking for her, because she's your buddy's girlfriend, I guess.
O'Neill, what's wrong?
Sounded like Bella. She had a fix, okay?
What kind?
Sex. Look it up. Christ.
Meanwhile, you find out that there is an entire army of corporate mercenaries on the ship. Because of course there is. I guess writers did what the design team wanted them to. And thanks to characters' inability to make any logical decisions, a small team of Colonial Marines is wandering through a giant ship filled with xenomorphs and hostile soldiers. I'm not gonna lie, I made a lot of notes on the plot, but as I'm looking through them and writing this, I am realizing how boring this shit is. The only highlights later in the game would be how Bella had a facehugger, and even though they found a surgeon that could remove the embryo, she still dies of space AIDS.
The embryo will extract fluid and nutrients from the host to construct a placenta, but it's not like a human's. The placenta is like a weed, rooting itself into every organ in the chest cavity. Look, even if you could surgically remove the embryo, the placenta is... it's like a cancer. Your organs will begin shutting down one by one, and then... you just die.
And how they somehow managed to write in Hicks shortly before the end of the story. The writing is bad. It has a fan fiction quality to it, especially when Hicks is present. Scenes with him are mostly exposition with him in the center of attention. I can only theorize, but the quick and dirty teaser for new crazy adventures of the crew must have been forced by Sega. I can't imagine anyone on the team hoping for a sequel.
Możesz mówić do siebie ile chcesz, Horsky. Oni i tak wrócą. A ty będziesz musiał kiedyś otworzyć drzwi.
Fuck off. Okay, nowadays, Aliens Colonial Marines exists mostly as a single-player experience, but developers clearly were hoping for more than that. From the very moment you start the game, you can see a player list and menu for joining a co-op campaign, very similar to a Call of Duty lobby. I can't say for sure how good or bad it is, but I have a sneaky suspicion that the extremely linear level design, often with tight corridors, does not help with that at all. But then again, even third volleyball is fun with a friend, right? After every mission you get an update on your level and challenges progress. You gain ranks, and all those contribute to unlocking the previously mentioned gun modifications and skins. I have played single player campaign, let's say about 1.5 times, and I am nowhere near unlocking everything. At first, I thought that game expected me to play its campaign multiple times to get all the stuff, which I have absolutely no intention of doing, but on the other hand, there is conventional multiplayer. I have no first-hand experience of it, and once again, no ambition to change that. Looking through footage on YouTube, it seems decent enough. It's asymmetrical, with Aliens and Marines themes. You can unlock weapons and perks, standard stuff really. Plenty of people reminiscing it in the comments, so good job Randy, I guess. As I mentioned before, a huge chunk of the game is composed of tight corridors. There are desperate attempts to make it a bit more interesting by making you wait for NPCs to open doors while attacked, spawning an alien behind you, or implementing very lame jumpscare. And those moments are the lows of level design. There are parts of the game that seem to be designed way more competently. Second mission, while not a great level by any measure, comes to mind as a highlight. It is the first level with human enemies, and one that, while still on a spaceship, opens up a bit. On certain arenas, game forces you to flank enemies hiding behind cover while your bodies are pinned down, and you get the peekaboo gameplay of cover shooters. I know it's really basic stuff and I am scraping the bottom of the barrel a bit, but seriously, compared to fighting aliens that just jump at you in a straight line, this is amazing. At some point, game also introduces turrets, another by-the-book staple of lazy FPS design, and as always, you have to find a way around them to deactivate them. Aliens Colonial Marines likes to find some bullshit reason to come back to a location which has been repopulated with enemies in the meantime. It's hard to show this in footage without it being boring, so here you have this guy. He shouldn't be clipping through the door, but rather sitting there waiting patiently until said door opens as we go through this area for the second time later. The biggest flaw of Aliens levels, however, is inconsistency. Decent areas are mixed with boring garbage, and what is baffling, mechanics introduced can disappear for a long time or forever. The only part that stays consistent is the last quarter of the game and its final boss. It's incredibly rushed. I will talk more about the Queen fight later, but levels leading to it are garbage. Not incompetent garbage, but rather rushed garbage. A different breed of trash. It is really hard to describe, but it's recognizable mostly in the way that enemies spawn and are placed on the map. They don't feel organic. As you walk into an area with Xenos and soldiers fighting, it seems like they have been waiting for you to enter before seeing each other. Obviously, that is the case in pretty much all games, but players should not be able to notice that. Game features many mechanics present in pretty much all FPS games from early 2000s, but often with a sick twist. The hybrid, rechargeable but segmented health bar that still uses health packs is alright, but melee attack, instead of being an instant kill for weaker enemies, like it is in most games serving as a risk-reward mechanic, it seems to work more like a pet button for xenomorphs. Sometimes, when game feels like it, it stuns the xeno for a couple of seconds, but lack of range and any feedback makes it feel incredibly ineffective. But enough of that. It has been however long it has been, and I am still yet to talk about guns in this shooting game. On the surface level, game tries to mimic the feel of COD. You get the impractical hipfire, quick ADS with auto-aim, the whole 9 yards, but it doesn't work. While aiming down the sights, guns are still impressively inaccurate. Not that you would be doing that very often. In tight corridors there isn't much placed for long shots. Xenos, which are once again the main enemies through the game, like to rush you, and by the time you start shooting, they often take third of the screen. At this point, there is no reason to pull the left trigger. Even with ungodly amount of spread during the hipfire, most of the lead is going to hit the xenomorph. I have a sneaky suspicion that lack of accuracy was the quick and dirty attempt to balance the game. It might have worked, but god, at what cost? The most severe case of that are shotguns. I know, games like to downplay their range for gameplay reasons, but ones in Colonial Marines are effective at 3 meters at most, and got fucked by RNG so hard that it takes between 1 and 4 shots to exercise the most basic enemy, unless you shoot literally point blank. All that, and the fact that hostiles have almost no reaction to damage and take a decent amount of lead before giving up on life, leads to pretty much all guns feeling impactless. Only ones that feel usable are the collectibles from the movie. You get Gorman's pistol, Hicks shotgun, things like that. Game likes to pretend that those are hidden through the levels, but they are not. They are put slightly on the side every now and then. I wasn't looking for them at all and found all but Hudson's pulse rifle. Those guns have better stats, but no secondary fire, and there are no customizations for them. Speaking of secondary fire, it exists! Most guns have one by default and can be changed once unlocked. For example, grenade launcher, a default for pulse rifle, is almost acceptable. The only one that I found myself using regularly was flamethrower on the assault rifle. It's kinda like shotgun, with its reach comparable to spit, but its damage output is constant. That makes it a really decent option for getting out of a tight corner or when you are caught with empty magazine. It sounds decent, but secondary requires special ammo to be collected, and there is not a lot of it around. There's also the smart gun, second most iconic weapon from the entire franchise. It's loads of fun. In corridor, it's a force to be reckoned with. You might be curious why I use a singular form of corridor. That's because I only got to use it once. In reviews and videos I have seen of that game, people mention smart gun appears only a few times. I counted one. Forgot to mention the inventory system. You have 2 guns on quick swap and a pistol under the right D-pad, which I haven't used even once. You can assign any of the remaining guns to the quick swap, but entering the menu to do so does not pause the game, so it's not doable during combat. The big issue with guns in Colonial Marines is that game gives you no reason to experiment at all. Out of the basic unmodded guns, the only one that is somewhat effective is the pulse rifle. It has a decent fire rate, sizable clip, no accuracy, but no gun has that, and secondary that only sometimes leaves a bad aftertaste. Ammo for it is laying around pretty much everywhere, so it stayed as my primary through the pretty much whole game. If you ever find yourself running empty, worry not, because you should be keeping assault rifle just a button press away. It fires in bursts and has decent secondary by default. That's it. That's what I found myself using most of the time. Only deviation was that sometimes I would exchange assault rifle for a shotgun when facing lots of xenomorphs, but that's pretty much it. I always wondered why a space colony would need so many energy drinks. But you know what? I ain't complaining. Cannon fodder in Aliens Colonial Marines comes in 2 distinct tastes. you have aliens, and you have Marines. Xenomorphs are a type of enemy that you probably have seen in dozens of games already. They run at you and jump, that's it. They can crawl on walls and sometimes ceiling, but mostly they just casually walk up to you and leave. Sometimes their pathfinding can be creative. And even when you have company of friendly Marines, they like to focus on you. This works okay in hallways, but really falls flat once you start fighting them in open areas. What is important with bug and swarm-like enemies in games, and what movie made a point of, is the feel of overwhelm. Aliens here don't really have that. It's more of a fail in front of level design and scripting, but they seem to be just put randomly on levels and spawning out of black textures in walls. Aside of by-the-books Xenos that you would expect, there are also facehuggers. They just jump on you and take some of your HP, but realistically they should be an instant kill. This depiction of facehuggers is not only an inaccuracy with the films, but also a wasted mechanic. Come on people! Alien Resurrection did it right! In the year 2000, on original fucking PlayStation. One last type of alien that you meet regularly is the spitting one. It appears for the first time in a dark cave, where it likes to hang on the ceiling and spit acid on you from safe distance. It also is glowing and I think has less HP than regular Xeno. It feels like an enemy designed just for the level you encounter it for the first time, and to be honest, works alright in that context. It also appears in last missions of the game in open areas, where it feels kinda just put in with no rhyme or reason. Just kinda there because model and AI was done. The mercenaries that you fight through the game are also of the type that you have probably fought many times before. Not much to say about that really. They hide behind cover, shoot, and sometimes talk to each other. They are also incredibly dumb, and sometimes break. Have you seen that? That was the introduction to the tough type human enemy. It's a bad riff on Juggernauts, but really, they are just mercenaries with more HP. Both them and the regular type like to take their life head on and soak up entire magazine of bullets without any reaction before falling asleep, I guess. One thing common between all hostiles is that they feel criminally unsatisfactory to fight. They not only don't seem like a mechanically complex challenge, but also give little feedback to the player. Still, I dare to say that it's more fun to fight human enemies. At least in parts where there is some level design involved, it can be challenging. This basic human enemy has been perfected, mostly thanks to Call of Duty, and it's hard to screw it up completely. Common between most reviews and videos on Aliens Colonial Marines is the praise of the underground sewer section. I beg to differ. I will say even more. Gameplay during standard levels is weak, but all of game's attempts to shake it up are even worse. Game desperately attempts to tease and hype up the first boss. You are, I guess, abducted by a big alien and glued to the wall. After introduction proceeds a sneaky quote-unquote jumpscare section, where Scully Alien shows his ugly face from above and shakes the screen every now and then. I can't say that is effective. One little thing that annoyed the hell out of me was how with each jumpscare game kept turning my fucking flashlight off. Immediately after that, we get the famed sewer section. You get the zombie-like dry aliens that are blind and explode. I want to, but I will not rant how little sense that makes. Player's goal is to flip some switches and exit the area. The big twist is that mushroom Xenos can see you, but sure as hell they can hear you, unless you are crouched. Then they will walk into you without noticing. Once they notice you, however, they will run towards you and explode, which is not lethal on normal difficulty. Also, switches are noisy.
Damn, man! You didn't tell me those guys exploded.
If there is one little moment where this game turns really good, it's the big alien chase where you have to cut and seal doors behind you. It has the music, it has the tension, but also it lasts no more than 3 minutes, so I will not say a word more about that. Shortly after that, we get the boss fight. I must admit, I got a little excited getting into the power loader, but I quickly calmed down. Couldn't replicate that when I was capturing footage, but the first time I entered that arena, I managed to stunlock the bastard and be done with it in under a minute. When working as intended, the fight keeps up with the theme and is, once again, junky. One pretty neat thing about the boss, however, is the fact that it was made with co-op in mind. You get the NPC companions that fight regular Xenos while you bonk the big alien. I assume that in co-op those NPCs will be controlled by other people. At the end of it all, we have the final boss fight with the Queen. Calling it a fight, however, would be quite a stretch. All you do is sneak around the hangar, lure the bitch away and mess with some switches. That's it. And you know what's the worst of it all? Game won't give you the satisfaction of killing the bitch. Oh no. They need the big guy Cruz to die like a hero so he will be remembered and reminisced in Alien's Colonial Marines sequel that, as we all know, exists and is a big hit, right? With all that being said, I don't think it's a big surprise that I wouldn't recommend playing this game to anyone but the most distinguished masochists. Game is serviceable at best, with peak points being mediocre. What I got from playing this game that I couldn't possibly get from watching gameplay footage is the kind of junk that characterizes Alien's Colonial Marines. It's junky as hell, but like mentioned before, I'd say that there are many flavors of junk. Couldn't shake the feeling that game bad not because lack of skill, but because of mismanagement and lack of time. Speaking of...
Oh yeah, Mr. Krabs!
Technically speaking, by the time Gearbox passed development of Colonial Marines to Timegate, there were 4 years of work already done to the project. Well, actually not. What was supplied to Timegate was a mixture of assets and a lightning shader. Hardly a project 4 years into making, huh? Most, if not all, was thrown away by Timegate, as there was pretty much nothing to continue from. Count in that there were many fundamental changes to the story that forced massive redesigns, reorientations or deletion of levels, and interference from both Sega and Gearbox, sometimes expecting completely different things. Let's just say that it was not a good time to work in Timegate. In the mid-2012, Gearbox took over the project and once again binned a bunch of progress done to the game. Partially because it wasn't running at all on PS3, partially because of quality of work done so far. The game feels like it was made in 9 months, and that's because it was. If there is one thing to take away from this whole mess, it's the fact that Sega still publishes games, Randy still runs Gearbox, and Timegate closed its doors shortly after Colonial Marines launched. I won't lie, they weren't the best studio. I've played Section 8. It's meh, but goddammit they deserved better. They have seen an opportunity to work on big IP with the big boys and got the short end of the stick. Wait a minute. Timegate Studios faced 7.35 million in damages and lost the license for Section 8 as a part of a fraud suit between itself and South Peak. I have no time for this bullshit. Remember kids, Randy is a greasy bastard. Take care.